Help me!" The scream tore through the canyon like a warning shot, echoing off stone and sky. And if you stay with this story until the very end, you'll see how one cry changed everything. Before we begin, like this video and subscribe to the channel, because stories about courage and justice deserve to be heard. The overlook was supposed to be peaceful. Wind brushed the tall grass, birds circled lazily above, and the cliff's edge fell away into a vast stretch of blue distance. For Amara Lewis, it was meant to be a quiet place, a pause from a world that often stared too long or spoke too loudly when it noticed her cane. She was used to moving carefully, measuring each step, trusting the rhythm she'd learned after the accident that changed her life. What she wasn't used to was laughter following her footsteps. At first, she told herself it was nothing. Teenagers joked everywhere. But the sound grew closer, sharper, meaner. When she turned, 3 figures blocked the narrow path back, faces twisted into smirks that made her stomach tighten. One of them mimicked the way she leaned on her cane. Another rolled his eyes and said something cruel about how she didn't belong here. Amara's heart pounded, but she lifted her chin. She had learned that shrinking never protected anyone. "I'm just leaving," she said calmly, trying to step past. The tallest boy moved first, planting his foot in her path. The others laughed. They circled her like this was a game. One grabbed the strap of her backpack and yanked it loose, sending it skidding across the dirt toward the edge. Amara reached for it instinctively, and the ground shifted under her feet. Pebbles tumbled into the open air, clicking as they vanished below. Fear flashed hot and bright. She froze, breath shallow, cane trembling in her grip. The boys leaned in, voices low, daring her to move, daring her to fall. They didn't touch her again, but they didn't have to. The threat was enough. The cliff loomed inches behind her, wind tugging at her jacket like a warning. Amara thought of her mother's voice telling her to be careful, of the long hours of therapy that taught her balance, of all the times she'd been told to stay quiet, stay back, stay safe. She thought of how tired she was of being afraid, and then she screamed, not weak, not broken, but fierce and full of life. "Help me." The sound carried farther than she imagined. It raced along the road below, where engines rumbled and chrome flashed in the sun. 2 motorcycles slowed. Leather creaked. Helmets turned toward the cliff. The scream came again, raw, unmistakable. The riders exchanged a glance and swung their bikes toward the dirt access road without hesitation. Up on the overlook, the laughter faltered. One of the boys looked over his shoulder, suddenly uncertain. Amara kept shouting, planting her cane, grounding herself, refusing to be silent. The wind stole some of her words, but not the urgency, not the truth. Far below, engines cut hard as the bikes climbed. The riders knew that sound, the sound of someone in real trouble. And as they rode, the distance between cruelty and consequence began to close. Amara stood at the edge, shaking but unbroken, her voice carrying across stone and sky. She didn't know who would hear her. She only knew she had to be heard. Stay with this story, because what happens next turns fear into justice. And don't forget to like and subscribe, so you never miss stories where courage changes everything. The engines grew louder, not fast or reckless, but steady, confident in a way that made the air itself feel different. Amara heard them before she saw them, a deep rumble climbing the dirt road that curled toward the overlook like a promise. The boys heard it too. Their jokes thinned out, laughter snapping short as uncertainty crept in. One glanced down the path, another scoffed and tried to look unfazed, but the third shifted his weight, eyes darting. Amara didn't move. She planted her cane again, breathing the way she'd been taught, letting the rhythm steady her legs. The cliff was still behind her, the wind still tugging, but now there was something else, hope arriving on 2 wheels. The motorcycles crested the rise and slowed near the trailhead, dust settling around black boots and chrome. 2 riders dismounted, tall silhouettes against the sky, leather jackets marked with patches worn soft by miles. They didn't rush in shouting. They walked, measured and calm, eyes reading the scene like a map. The boys stiffened. One muttered that it was nothing, just a joke. The nearer rider stopped a few steps away, his voice low but carrying. Step back from her. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact, the kind that didn't need volume. The second rider angled slightly, not blocking escape, just removing the illusion of control. Amara felt the space around her open, just enough to breathe. She edged forward an inch, then another, until solid ground replaced the whisper of empty air. The boys tried to laugh it off, words tumbling over each other, but their bravado cracked under the rider's steady gaze. "You heard her?" the first rider said. "She asked for help." Silence stretched. Wind hissed through grass. One boy took a step back. Another followed. Their circle dissolved, shrinking into three uneasy figures who suddenly remembered the path behind them. The riders didn't touch them. They didn't need to. Presence did the work. When the boys finally retreated, boots scuffing, excuses trailing thin, Amara's knees wobbled. She sank onto a rock, heart hammering, tears burning hot and sudden. The second rider crouched nearby, keeping a respectful distance. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, then shook her head, then nodded again. I will be," she managed. He smiled, gentle, and offered her backpack, which he'd retrieved from the edge. The first rider scanned the overlook, then turned back to her. "Name?" "Amara." Saying it felt grounding. He introduced himself simply, no titles, no bravado. They asked if she wanted to call someone, if she needed water, if sitting was okay. Each question returned a piece of control to her hands. She realized her cane was still shaking and laughed weakly at herself. The sound surprised her, and then she cried, quiet and unstoppable. No one told her to stop. They waited. When she was ready, they helped her stand, slow and steady, matching her pace without comment. As they walked toward the trailhead, the canyon looked different. Not smaller, but less menacing. The riders talked about the road, about weather, about nothing that demanded answers. At the bikes, one offered his jacket against the chill. She accepted. Leather smelled like sun and miles. A ranger arrived not long after, radio crackling, concern etched on his face. Amara told her story once, clearly, without apology. The riders stayed nearby, anchors in the background. When it was done, the ranger thanked her for speaking up. "You did the right thing," he said. Amara believed him. As the sun dipped lower, the riders prepared to leave. "You're not alone," one said, tapping the side of his helmet. "Remember that." She watched them roll away, engines easing back into the road's long song. The overlook fell quiet again, but not empty. Amara stood taller, jacket warm around her shoulders, knowing that her voice, shaken and brave, had carried far enough to change the day. The canyon returned to its quiet rhythms, but Amara carried the day with her like a second heartbeat. In the hours after the ranger's report, she sat on a bench near the visitor center, wrapped in borrowed leather, watching the horizon soften into dusk. The shock ebbed in waves, leaving behind a strange clarity. She replayed the moment she chose to scream, the way fear had sharpened into resolve. When her mother arrived, breathless and pale, Amara stood before the apology could spill out. "I'm okay," she said, and meant it. They held each other for a long time anyway. News traveled quickly after that, first through park staff, then through town, then through the local paper that framed the story around courage rather than cruelty. The boys were identified and suspended pending investigation, their parents summoned, their bravado reduced to statements and silence. The ranger followed up with Amara explaining next steps with care, offering resources, asking consent before every question. Each choice mattered. It rebuilt trust brick by brick. At school, whispers trailed her for a week. Some awkward, some admiring, a few ashamed. A teacher asked if she wanted accommodations. Amara asked instead for a meeting about safety on school trips. The room listened. For the first time, she felt like the conversation wasn't about what she lacked, but about what everyone owed each other. One afternoon, a small envelope appeared in her locker. Inside was a card with a simple note and a patch stitched neatly to the corner. Not an invitation, not a promise, just a reminder. "Any road can change," it read. She smiled, tucked it into her bag, and walked home with her cane tapping a steady, confident rhythm. The days grew warmer. Amara returned to the overlook with her mother and a friend, staying well back from the edge, letting the wind brush her face without taking her breath. She practiced the grounding techniques her therapist taught her, counting birds, naming colors, breathing until the tightness loosened. Healing didn't erase the memory, it gave her tools to hold it. In town meetings, residents talked about better signage, patrols, and education. Some wanted punishment alone. Others wanted prevention. Amara spoke once, briefly, about how listening early could save more than one person. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. People leaned in. The boys wrote letters as part of the process. One was stiff and defensive. Another was halting, unsure. The third was raw, acknowledging harm without excuse. Amara read them with her mother beside her. She didn't respond. Forgiveness, she decided, was a road she would choose later if at all. What mattered now was forward motion. She joined a local adaptive hiking group, discovering trails that welcomed her pace and strength. She volunteered with a youth program that paired older students with younger ones, teaching by example what it meant to intervene, to notice, to care. On weekends, the rumble of motorcycles sometimes drifted through town, and Amara would look up, not searching for faces, just acknowledging the sound. It reminded her that help could arrive from unexpected directions, and that asking was not weakness. When summer settled in, she stood at the overlook again, sunlight warming her shoulders, the canyon vast and beautiful. She didn't edge close. She didn't need to. She closed her eyes and listened to the wind, steady and alive, and felt the truth settle where fear once lived. Her voice had weight. It could travel. It could change the shape of a day. And wherever the road bent next, she would meet it standing. By the time autumn arrived, the canyon had changed colors, and so had Amara's life. The leaves burned gold and rust along the roads she now traveled with confidence, her cane striking a rhythm that felt like punctuation instead of limitation. What happened at the overlook didn't vanish, it transformed. The investigation concluded with accountability and community action, not just consequences but commitments. The park installed clearer barriers and call boxes. The school adopted peer intervention training. Town meetings became less about outrage and more about responsibility. Amara watched it all with a steady heart, learning that justice isn't a single moment. It's a series of choices made again and again. She was invited to speak at a youth safety forum, and though her hands shook at first, her voice found its path. She talked about listening for distress, about stepping in without becoming a hero, about how presence can interrupt harm. Parents nodded. Teens leaned forward. The room felt awake. Afterward, a girl with braces thanked her for saying what she couldn't yet say. Amara smiled and told her she'd find the words when she needed them. At home, the leather jacket was returned with a note of thanks, but the patch stayed pinned inside Amara's backpack, a quiet talisman. She kept hiking with her adaptive group, discovering overlooks that offered beauty without risk, learning that courage could be gentle. She began mentoring younger students, teaching them how to ask for help and how to give it. On difficult days, she remembered the engines climbing the road, the calm voices cutting through fear, and she breathed until the world steadied. Forgiveness remained a distant hill, visible but not urgent. Healing took precedence. When winter came, snow softened the town, and Amara found herself laughing more easily, trusting the ground beneath her feet. She understood now that strength wasn't the absence of fear. It was movement through it, step by careful step. On the anniversary of that day, she returned to the visitor center bench with her mother and watched the horizon blush at sunset. The canyon was still vast, still powerful, but it no longer felt like a threat. It felt like a witness. Amara stood, shoulders back, and whispered a thank you. To herself for choosing to be heard, to those who listened, to the road that carried help when it mattered most. Her story didn't end with rescue. It continued with resolve. And as she walked away, cane tapping a confident cadence, she knew this truth would travel too. Voices matter, help can arrive, and courage can change the course of a life. If this story moved you, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, because sharing stories of courage and compassion helps them reach the people who need them most.